3 long days passed in the cold darkness of space, the Volari ship bright. Dawn floated helplessly like a broken toy drifting in an endless black ocean. Commander Kale and his crew were growing weaker with each passing hour. Their beautiful advanced life support systems had failed completely, and they had no idea how to fix them without their computers and automated repair systems. The inside of the alien ship was becoming colder, and the air was getting thinner. Science Officer Nira wrapped her arms around her thin body trying to stay warm, but it was no use. The heating system needed electricity and the backup power was almost gone. Her crystal eyes looked dim and tired as she reported the terrible news to her commander. "We are down to emergency rations," she whispered in a voice so weak it was hard to hear. "At this rate, we have maybe 2 more days before we run out of food and water. After that, we will slowly die from hunger and thirst." Commander Kale felt his heart beating fast. With fear and desperation, his people had never faced such a basic survival situation before. They had always relied on their perfect technology to keep them safe and comfortable. Now that technology was dead, and they had no skills to survive without it. He looked at his crew and saw the same fear in their large, beautiful eyes. Through the dying sensors of their ship, they could still see the human vessel in the distance, somehow still working and moving around the asteroid. The humans had been busy for 3 days straight doing things that seemed impossible to the aliens. They were not just surviving, they were actually accomplishing their mission of mining valuable metals from the asteroid. "How are they still alive?" Commander Kale asked himself over and over again. "Their technology is so much more primitive than ours. They should be dead by now, just like we will be soon. But instead, they seem to be getting stronger." The aliens watched in growing amazement as the humans did incredible things that defied all logic. Captain Deho had managed to build a communication system using spare parts from the mining equipment. The device looked like a collection of wires and metal pieces held together with tape and prayer, but somehow it worked. Engineer Hyojin had created a water recycling system from tools that were meant for digging in asteroids. Pilot So Ra was doing something even more incredible. She was navigating through the dangerous asteroid field using star charts that were drawn on paper with pencils. Her calculations were done by hand using mathematics that she had learned years ago in school. She did not need computers or electronic instruments to find her way through space. She used the stars themselves as her guide. Medic Taemin had turned a corner of the ship into a medical station using equipment that was never meant for treating injuries. He had made bandages from spare clothing and created medicines from the emergency chemical supplies. The tools in his makeshift hospital looked rough and simple, but they worked just as well as the fancy medical equipment the aliens were used to. "They are not just surviving," Nira observed with growing respect and wonder in her voice. "They are actually thriving in conditions that would kill most species we have encountered. They seem to enjoy solving problems that have no obvious solutions." The humans had noticed the alien ship floating dead in space, and Captain Deho was trying to establish contact with them. He had rigged his simple radio system to send messages in many different frequencies, hoping that someone would hear him and respond. His message was short and direct, but it carried the warmth of human kindness. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Kim. Do you need assistance? We have seen that your ship is not moving and we think you might be in trouble. If you can hear this message, please respond and we will try to help." Youth Volari could not believe what they were hearing. The primitive humans were offering to help them, the advanced species that had been watching and studying them like laboratory animals. These supposedly inferior beings were willing to risk their own lives to save strangers they had never met before. It was a concept that was completely foreign to Volari thinking. Commander Kale felt pride and desperation fighting a war inside his heart. His people had always believed they were superior to other species in every way. They had better technology, better medicine, better everything. But now these humans were proving that superiority meant nothing when survival was at stake. His crew was dying while the humans were not only living but offering to share their lives with others. The alien commander looked around at his beautiful ship with its smooth walls and perfect design. Everything had been built to work flawlessly in ideal conditions. But space was not ideal and conditions were never perfect. The humans seemed to understand this basic truth, while the Volari had forgotten it completely. "Send a distress signal, Commander." Kale finally ordered his communications officer accept their offer for help. We have no choice but to trust these humans even though we do not understand how they can. Help us. The human ship moved closer to the alien vessel and both species got there first. Real look at each other through the windows of their ships. The Valari were tall and elegant with smooth pale skin and large eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe. They moved with grace and beauty like dancers performing a slow, careful ballet. The humans looked completely different. They were shorter and more solid with rough skin that showed the marks of hard work and difficult living. Their clothes were practical and worn. Their hands were dirty from handling tools and equipment, but their eyes held something the aliens had never seen before, a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished. Their ship is beautiful, Hayo Jin observed as she studied the alien vessel through her binoculars. It looks like it was built by artists instead of engineers. Every line and curve is perfect, but I do not see any repair patches or modification marks. That is because it was not built to be repaired, Captain Deho replied with understanding in his voice. It was built to never break down. But everything breaks down eventually. Our ship is not beautiful, but it keeps working when everything goes wrong. The human ship was ugly. Compared to the alien vessel, it was covered with patches where new metal had been welded over old damaged areas. Different colored paints marked where repairs had been made over the years. The inside was cramped and smelled of oil and recycled air and human sweat, but it was still alive and working while the beautiful alien ship was dying. So Ra piloted their ship as close as possible to the alien vessel, but the two ships could not connect directly because they have been built by completely different species with different ideas about how ships should work. The docking ports were different sizes and shapes, and the alien ship had no backup systems for manual connection. We will have to transfer their crew to our ship, Captain Deho explained to his team, but our ship was built for 4 people. How can we fit 12 more people inside such a small space? We will manage, so Ra said with confidence. We always find a way to make things work. We will share our food and water and air. We will sleep in shifts and work together. Human ships are built to carry more than their official capacity in emergencies. The rescue operation was about to begin, and both species were about to learn things about each other that would change their understanding of what it meant to be intelligent and what it meant to survive. The rescue operation began immediately, even though it seemed impossible. Captain Deho and his crew worked with their limited resources to save the stranded aliens. The two ships could not connect properly because they had been built by different species with completely different ideas about ship design, so the humans had to figure out another way to transfer the dying Valari crew to their own vessel. We need to move their people to our ship, Captain Deho explained to his team while studying the alien vessel through his binoculars. Their life support systems are failing, and they will die if we do not act quickly. But we have a big problem. The problem was obvious to everyone. Their small mining ship was already crowded with 4 people, and all their equipment and supplies. Now they needed to fit 12 more beings inside the same tiny space. It seemed impossible, but the humans had faced impossible situations before, and they always found a way to make things work. Our ship barely supports 4 people, Tae-min pointed out while calculating how much food and water they had in storage. How can we fit 12 more aliens inside such a small space without everyone dying from lack of air or supplies? We'll manage, Captain Deho said with the calm confidence that came from years of solving problems in space. We always find a way. We will share everything we have and work together until we can get everyone to safety. The Valari watched in fascination as the humans began solving problems that seemed to have no solutions. When the airlock systems between the two ships turned out to be completely incompatible, Engineer Hyo Jin disappeared into the storage areas and came back with an armload of spare parts and tools. She began building an adapter that would connect the 2 different systems. Why do you have so many spare parts? Commander Kale asked as he watched Hyo Jin work. Her small hands moved quickly and confidently as she welded pieces of metal together and wrapped connections with tape. Most species carry only what they need for their planned mission because things break, Hyo Jin answered without looking up from her work. Things always break at the worst possible time and usually in ways you never expected. So we carry extra parts for everything and tools to make new parts when we run out of the old ones. This concept was completely foreign to the Volari. Their advanced technology was designed to never fail, and when it did fail, they had no backup plans. Or spare parts, they simply expected rescue teams to come and fix everything for them. But the humans expected everything to break, and they prepared for that failure constantly when the atmospheric mixtures between the two ships turned out to be different. Medic Tae-min created breathing apparatus from diving equipment that happened to be stored in their emergency supplies. The aliens breathed a mixture that had more oxygen than humans needed, but Tae-min figured out how to filter the air so both species could survive. "Why do you carry diving equipment on a spaceship?" Nira asked as Tae-min fitted her with a breathing mask that looked like it had been built from spare parts. "We are nowhere near any oceans or lakes because you never know when you might need to work underwater," Captain Dae-ho replied. "Space stations sometimes have water recycling systems that break down. Mining operations sometimes hit underground water deposits. We carry equipment for situations we might never encounter because we might encounter them." The rescue operation continued for hours as the humans transferred the alien crew one by one from their dying ship to the cramped human vessel. Each transfer required careful planning and improvised solutions. The humans had to modify their spacesuits to fit alien body shapes and create new safety procedures for beings they had never worked with before. As the Volari crew was moved to the human ship, they discovered something amazing about human technology. Every critical system had a backup. Every backup had a manual override. Every manual override had a primitive alternative that would work even when everything else failed. The humans did not just prepare for things to go wrong, they assumed everything would go wrong. "Eventually you live like the universe is trying to kill you," Science Officer Nira observed as she watched Hyojin repair a damaged air filter using parts from 3 different systems that were never meant to work together. "It is engineer," Hyojin replied with a cheerful smile, while her hands continued working. "The universe is always trying to kill everything in it. Radiation storms, solar flares, asteroid impacts, equipment failures, hostile aliens. That is why we are still here. We prepare for everything that can go wrong and some things that probably cannot go wrong." The Volari crew was safely moved to the human ship, but now they faced a new challenge. The mining vessel was designed for 4 people, but now it held 16 beings from 2 different species. The air recycling system was working at maximum capacity. The food supplies were being carefully rationed, and everyone had to share sleeping spaces. The inside of the human ship was cramped, noisy, and smelled of oil and recycled air and alien sweat, but it was alive in a way the sterile Volari ship had never been. Every surface showed signs of repair, modification, and adaptation. Patches of different colored metal covered old damage. New systems had been added wherever there was room. Wires and pipes ran along the walls in patterns that followed function instead of beauty. "Your ship is very different from ours," Commander Kale observed as he tried to find a comfortable position in the small space. "Everything looks like it has been repaired many times. Why do you not build ships that do not need so much maintenance?" "Because ships that never need maintenance do not exist," Captain Dae-ho replied while checking the status of their overloaded life support systems. "Everything wears out, everything breaks, everything needs to be fixed or replaced eventually. We build our ships to be repaired because we know they will need to be repaired." The concept was revolutionary to the Volari, who had always believed that perfect technology could solve all problems, but the humans had built their entire civilization on the opposite idea. They assumed that all technology would eventually fail, and they had developed an entire culture around fixing, modifying, and repurposing everything they owned. The aliens learned about human concepts that had no equivalent in their language. Jury rigging meant using whatever materials were available to solve immediate problems. Making do meant accepting imperfect solutions that worked well enough. Improvisation meant creating new solutions from existing resources without following any predetermined plan. These were not just emergency measures, they were a way of life. Humans expected their technology to fail, and they had developed skills and attitudes that turned failure into opportunity. They did not see broken equipment as useless. They saw it as raw materials for building something new. As the combined crew settled into their new living arrangement, the Volari began to understand that they had encountered something more than just another spacefaring species. They had met a people who had turned weakness into strength and limitation into creativity. The humans were not just survivors, they were teachers showing other species what it really meant to adapt and thrive in a hostile universe. The alien ship moved slowly through the dark space above Earth like a giant silver fish swimming in an endless black ocean. The ship was called Bright Dawn, and it was home to the Valari people who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Commander Kale stood at the big window of his ship looking down at the blue and green world below him. His skin was smooth and pale like moonlight, and his large eyes could see things that human eyes could never see. The Valari were proud of being smart and advanced. They had perfect technology that never broke down. They had medicine that could fix any sickness. They had ships that could travel faster than light itself, but Earth confused them. The humans living on that world seemed weak and small compared to other life forms the Valari had found on different planets. Commander Kale had 6 long fingers on each hand, and he pressed them against the cold glass of the window. He had been watching Earth for many days now, trying to understand how such fragile creatures had managed to survive long enough to build spaceships and leave their home planet. Most species the Valari found were either very strong or very smart, but humans seemed to be neither. Science officer Nira walked up to the stand beside her commander. Her body was tall and thin like a reed growing by a lake. Her eyes were made of something that looked like crystal, and they reflected the starlight from outside the ship. She had spent her whole life studying other worlds and the creatures that lived on them, but humans were different from anything she had ever seen before. Sir, we have found something interesting, Nira said to her commander. Her voice was soft and musical like wind chimes moving in a gentle breeze. We are watching a small human ship that is moving toward the asteroid belt. It looks like they are going there to dig for metals and stones. Commander Kale turned away from the window to look at the screens that showed what was happening in space around them. Perfect, he said. This will help us understand how they work. Maybe we can finally learn how such a weak species managed to survive long enough to reach space. The human ship belonged to Captain Dae-ho Kim, who had been working as an asteroid miner for 15 years. He was not young anymore, and his face had lines on it from years of hard work in space. His hair was black with some gray streaks, and his hands were rough from handling tools and equipment every day. He knew the asteroid belt better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. Captain Dae-ho had 3 other people working with him on his ship. Engineer Hyojin Park was a woman who could fix almost anything that broke. She had small hands that were perfect for working with tiny parts and wires. Her mind was quick, and she could solve problems that would make other people give up. Pilot So-Ra Lee was young and had good eyes for flying through dangerous asteroid fields. She could make the ship dance between giant rocks like a bird flying through tree branches. The last crew member was Medic Tae-min Choi, who took care of everyone when they got hurt or sick. He was gentle and kind, but also brave when danger came. He carried a bag full of medical supplies and knew how to use everything inside it, even in the most difficult situations. Human ship was old and had been repaired many times. You could see patches of different colored metal where new parts had been welded over old damaged areas. The inside was cramped and everything smelled like oil and recycled air. But the ship was reliable, and Captain Dae-ho trusted it with his life. Asteroid looks clean. So Ra reported from the pilot seat where she was checking all the instruments and screens. No other ships in the area, which means we will not have to share whatever we find, Captain. Dae-ho studied the readings on his screens. The numbers told him about the size and shape of the asteroid and what kinds of metals might be inside. Good, he said. Let us get to work. We need this haul to cover the ship repairs. The money from selling the metals would help pay for new parts and supplies. As the human ship got closer to the asteroid, something terrible happened. The star that warmed this part of space suddenly erupted with a massive solar flare. It was like a giant explosion of light and energy that spread out in all directions. The electromagnetic pulse from the flare hit both ships at the same time like an invisible hammer. The Valari research vessel Bright Dawn was built for perfect conditions in controlled environments. Its advanced systems were not designed to handle unexpected problems like solar flares. All the beautiful technology that the Valari were so proud of suddenly stopped working. The lights went out and the computers shut down. The ship began to drift helplessly through space like a dead leaf floating on water, emergency power failing. Nira reported to her commander, but now her voice was full of fear. Instead of calm confidence, life support systems are down to 30%. We do not have much time before we run out of air to breathe, Commander. Kale felt panic rising in his chest like cold water filling his lungs. His people had never prepared for such basic survival problems. Their technology was supposed to prevent all disasters, not fix them after they happened. They had no backup plans because they had never needed backup plans before. Meanwhile, on the human ship, something very different was happening. Captain Deho looked at his dead instruments and broken screens with calm eyes. He had seen this kind of problem before. Solar flares were dangerous, but they were also part of working in space. Every experienced asteroid miner knew that electronics could fail at any moment. Jin, get the manual controls online, Captain Deho said in a steady voice that showed no fear. So, plot a course using stellar navigation like the old space pilots used to do. Tae-min, check the emergency supplies and make sure we have everything we need. The 3 crew members moved quickly but without panic. They had trained for this exact situation many times. Each person knew exactly what to do when the main systems failed. Hyojin crawled under the control panels to reach the manual switches that would let them steer the ship by hand. So, Ra pulled out star charts printed on paper and began calculating their position using the positions of nearby stars. Min opened the emergency storage compartments and checked their supplies of food, water, and medical equipment. He made notes on a piece of paper using a pencil because even the electronic notepads were not working. Everything they needed was there in simple, reliable forms that did not need electricity to work. The aliens watched through their failing sensors as the humans did something that seemed impossible. The human ship was not just surviving the disaster, it was continuing with its mission while the advanced Valari technology lay dead and useless. The primitive human systems kept working. The humans actually landed their ship on the asteroid and began mining operations using hand tools and muscle. Power Commander Kale stared at the screens in amazement. How are they still alive? He asked. How can they keep working when their technology is so much more primitive than ours? They should be helpless just like we are, but the humans were not helpless at all. They had something the Valari did not understand. They expected their technology to fail, and they had prepared for that failure in advance. Every important system on their ship had a backup. Every backup had a manual override. Every manual override had a simple primitive alternative that would work even when everything else stopped. The Valari had built their civilization on the idea that perfect technology would solve all problems. But the humans had built their civilization on the idea that all technology would eventually break down, and you had to be ready to survive when it did. This difference in thinking was about to save some lives and change the way 2 species understood each other. As the human ship continued its work on the asteroid, the Valari ship drifted further into the darkness of space. Its crew was slowly dying while the supposedly inferior humans thrived in the same dangerous conditions that had defeated the advanced aliens. This was the beginning of a lesson that would change both species forever. Living together on the cramped mining ship, the aliens discovered even more surprising things about human survival methods. The humans did not just survive difficult situations, they actually seemed to enjoy the challenge of making impossible things work. They took broken equipment and turned it into something completely different that worked even better than the original your species is very creative, Commander Kale observed as he watched engineer Hyojin repair a damaged air filter using parts from 3 different systems that were never meant to work together. She had taken pieces from the water recycling unit, the food processing system, and the waste management system and somehow combined them into a new air purification device. We have to be creative, Hyojin replied while her hands continued working with practiced skill. We do not have perfect technology that never breaks, so we learn to make do with what we have. When something breaks, we do not throw it away, we figure out how to use it for something else. The Valari learned about human concepts that seemed impossible to their orderly minds. Jury rigging meant using whatever materials happened to be available to solve immediate problems without worrying about whether the solution looked professional or followed proper procedures. Making do meant accepting imperfect solutions that worked well enough to keep everyone alive. Even if they were not as elegant as the original design, improvisation meant creating entirely new solutions from existing resources without following any predetermined plan or instruction manual. It meant looking at a pile of broken equipment and seeing not trash, but raw materials for building something that had never existed before it. Meant having the confidence to try things that might not work just to see what would happen. These were not just emergency measures for desperate situations. They were a complete way of thinking about problems and solutions. Humans expected their technology to fail, and they had developed an entire culture around fixing, modifying, and repurposing everything they owned. Nothing was ever considered permanently broken, and nothing was ever thrown away if it could possibly be used for something else. Medic Tae-min showed the aliens his medical bay, which was a masterpiece of human improvisation. The space had originally been designed as a storage closet, but he had transformed it into a fully functional medical facility using equipment that had never been intended for treating injuries. The diagnostic scanner was made from a mining sensor that had been modified to detect biological problems instead of metal deposits. The surgery table was actually a modified workbench that could be adjusted to different heights and angles. The anesthesia system had been built from components taken from the ship air recycling unit and the emergency oxygen supplies. The surgical instruments were a mixture of proper medical tools and improvised devices made from machine shop equipment. But how do you know it will work, science officer? Nira asked as she examined the strange collection of devices. How can you be sure that equipment designed for one purpose will work properly when used for something completely different? We do not know if it will work, Tae-min admitted with a cheerful smile. That is the point. We try anyway, and if it does not work, we try something else. We keep trying different things until we find something that does work, or until we run out of things to try. The aliens were amazed by human optimism in the face of complete uncertainty, where the Velari would give up immediately if they could not guarantee success in advance. Humans would attempt solutions that had never been tried before just to see if they might work. They seemed to believe that any problem could be solved if you were willing to try enough different approaches. Pilot So Ra demonstrated their navigation system, which was even more incredible than the medical equipment. She had combined electronic instruments with paper charts, magnetic compasses, and even a mechanical clock that had been built hundreds of years ago. The electronic parts gave her precise measurements when they were working. But the primitive backup systems kept working even when radiation storms killed all the advanced technology. Electronics fail in solar flares and radiation storms, she explained while showing Commander Kale how to read the paper star charts. But the stars are always there in the same positions, and mathematics works the same way whether you do it with a computer or with a pencil and paper. Do you not find it primitive to use such old-fashioned methods? Commander Kale asked as he watched her calculate their position using techniques that were older than his civilization. We find it reliable, So Ra replied without any embarrassment. Primitive things keep working. When advanced things break, a mechanical clock will keep running even when electromagnetic pulses destroy every electronic device on the ship. Paper charts do not need electricity, and pencils do not need batteries. The most shocking discovery came when they reached the asteroid where the humans had been working. The automated mining systems had been destroyed by the same solar flare that had disabled both ships, but the humans had continued their work using hand tools and muscle power. The Velari watched in disbelief as these supposedly fragile beings worked in the harsh environment of space using nothing but determination and basic equipment. The humans put on spacesuits that looked like they had been repaired dozens of times and went outside to work on the asteroid surface with tools that could have been used by their ancestors thousands of years ago. They used hammers and chisels and pickaxes to break rocks and extract valuable metals. They carried the heavy chunks of ore back to their ship by hand, working in shifts so that someone was always outside collecting materials. Your species is stronger than we thought, Commander Kale admitted as he watched Captain Daeho carry a piece of metal ore that weighed almost as much as he did. You are not stronger than other species, Captain Daeho corrected. While breathing heavily from his work, we are more stubborn. We do not give up when things become difficult. We just keep working until the job is done. The humans worked for hours in their patched spacesuits. moving slowly and carefully in the low gravity of the asteroid. They took breaks to rest and check their equipment, but they never stopped working completely. Even when their tools broke, they found ways to fix them or make new ones from the materials they found on the asteroid. The aliens realized that human strength was not physical, it was mental and emotional. They had an incredible ability to keep going when any reasonable person would quit. They seemed to believe that any goal could be achieved if you were willing to work hard enough and long enough and try enough different approaches. This is why your species survived long enough to reach Space Science Officer. Nira observed as she watched the humans work. You do not have the best technology or the strongest bodies, but you have something more important. You have the will to keep trying when everything else fails. The humans had shown the Valari that survival was not about having perfect equipment or ideal conditions. It was about adapting to whatever situation you found yourself in and making the best of whatever resources you had available. It was about turning problems into opportunities and finding creative solutions to challenges that seemed impossible to solve. As the mining operation continued, the aliens began to understand that they had encountered something truly special. The humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were teachers showing the galaxy what it really meant to be resourceful and determined and unwilling to give up when faced with overwhelming odds. While the humans continued their mining work on the asteroid, the long-range sensors detected another crisis developing in the outer reaches of the solar system. A Valari passenger ship called Peaceful Journey had suffered a catastrophic engine failure and was now drifting helplessly toward the massive star at the center of the system. The ship carried 300 civilian passengers, including families with children and elderly beings who had been traveling to visit relatives on distant worlds. The situation was desperate. The passenger ship had lost all power and was being pulled steadily toward the star by its enormous gravitational field. Once the ship reached a certain distance from the star, the heat and radiation would kill everyone aboard. Even if they managed to restart their engines, the point of no return was calculated to be reached in exactly 18 hours. We have to help them, Commander Kale said immediately when he received the distress signal from his own people. His voice was filled with urgency and fear. These are innocent civilians who have done nothing wrong. They do not deserve to die because of equipment failure, Captain. Deho studied the navigation data and shook his head sadly. Our ship cannot make that distance in time. He calculated the passenger ship is too far away and we are too slow. Even if we pushed our engines to maximum power, we would arrive too late to save anyone, even if we could reach them in time, Pilot Sora added. While running more calculations, we could not carry 300 additional people. Our ship is already overcrowded with the crew we rescued from your research vessel. We do not have enough air or food or water to support that many beings. The situation appeared completely hopeless. The Valari technology could not solve the problem because their advanced systems were either destroyed or insufficient for the task. The human technology was not powerful enough to reach the distant ship in time, and even if it could, the rescue vessel was too small to carry so many passengers. But the humans had something that the aliens were only beginning to understand. They had experience with impossible situations, and they had learned never to give up even when logic said there was no hope. They had developed a way of thinking that looked for solutions that other species would never consider. We cannot save them directly, Captain Deho said slowly as he studied the problem from every angle, but maybe we can give them what they need to save themselves. We cannot bring them to safety, but we can bring safety to them. The plan that Captain Deho proposed was completely insane by Valari standards. They would load their mining ship with basic survival equipment and crash it into the passenger ship at high speed. The supplies would give the civilians enough resources to repair their engines using human style improvisation and creative problem solving. The mining ship would be packed with tools, spare parts, food, water, and most importantly, instruction manuals written in simple language that explained how to fix advanced technology using primitive methods. It would be like sending a library of human knowledge across space to teach the Valari passengers how to survive when their perfect technology failed them. That is your only ship, Commander Kale protested when he understood what the humans were planning. You will be stranded here forever. If you give up your vessel, you will never be Able to return to your home world ships can be replaced, Captain Deho said with simple dignity. People cannot be replaced. These passengers are going to die unless someone helps them. We have the ability to help them, so we must help them. It is not complicated. The humans worked frantically to prepare the supply ship for its one-way journey. Engineer Hyojin loaded it with every tool they possessed, including hammers, saws, welding equipment, and spare parts from every system on their ship. Medic Taemin packed medical supplies and emergency rations that would keep the passengers alive while they worked on repairs. Pilot Ra calculated the exact trajectory needed to intercept the passenger ship and programmed the navigation computer with the course the supply ship would have to travel at maximum speed and arrive at precisely the right moment to dock with the passenger vessel before it reached the point of no return. But the most important cargo was not the physical supplies. It was the knowledge that engineer Hyojin had written down in instruction manuals. She created step-by-step guides for basic repairs. Using common materials that would be available on any passenger ship, she explained how to bypass damaged systems, how to jury-rig temporary solutions, and how to improvise replacement parts. Your people will not know how to use these techniques, Taemin pointed out as he watched Hyojin writing page after page of instructions. They have never learned to work with primitive tools or improvised solutions. Their education and training focuses on advanced technology that always works perfectly. They will learn, Captain Deho replied with confidence. When people have to survive, they learn very quickly. Fear and desperation are excellent teachers. They will figure out how to use our methods because the alternative is death. The supply ship was loaded with everything the humans could spare, and many things they could not really afford to lose. They gave up their backup life support systems, their emergency food supplies, and even their personal belongings if those items might be useful to the stranded passengers. The most touching moment came when the humans recorded personal messages for the Valari passengers. People they had never met were going to receive their only hope of survival, along with words of encouragement from strangers who cared enough to sacrifice everything to help them. You can do this, Captain Deho said into the recording device. Your people are intelligent and capable. You have the ability to solve this problem. You just need the right tools and the right attitude. Do not give up even when the repairs seem impossible. Keep trying different approaches until you find something that works. The supply ship launched perfectly, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space as it began its desperate journey across the solar system. The humans watched it disappear into the void, knowing they might never see their homeworld again. They had given up their ship, their supplies, and their own chance of survival to help people they had never met, but they had done what humans always did when others needed help. They had refused to give up, even when the situation seemed hopeless. They had found a way to turn their own sacrifice into hope for others. They had shown that sometimes the greatest strength comes from being willing to lose everything to save someone else. As the supply ship raced toward its destination, carrying the tools and knowledge that might save 300 lives, the humans settled in to wait. They had no way of knowing if their plan would work, but they had given the Valari passengers the best chance possible. Now it was up to those passengers to prove that any intelligent species could learn to survive when survival was the only option left. The rescue worked in ways that nobody had expected. The Valari passengers aboard the dying ship Peaceful Journey received the human supply vessel and its precious cargo of tools, knowledge, and hope. At first they could not believe what they were seeing. Their elegant passenger ship was filled with primitive equipment and instruction manuals, written in simple language that explained how to fix advanced technology using basic methods. The passengers had never seen anything like the human tools before. Hammers and wrenches and screwdrivers seemed impossibly crude compared to the sophisticated repair systems they were used to. But as their situation became more desperate, they began to follow the step-by-step instructions that engineer Hyojin had written for the elder Valari, who had lived for centuries and had never touched a physical tool in their lives, found themselves crawling through maintenance shafts with wrenches in their hands. Young Valari, who had been raised to believe that manual labor was beneath their dignity, discovered that working with their hands could save their lives. The instructions were written in such simple language that even children could understand them. Hyojin had assumed that the aliens would know nothing about human-style repairs, so she had explained everything from the very beginning. She had included diagrams and pictures and multiple ways to solve the same problem in case. The first method did not work following the human guidance. The Velari passengers began to repair their ship using techniques that would have been impossible for them to imagine before. They bypassed damaged computer systems by connecting wires directly. They created temporary power sources using parts. From the lighting system, they improvised air filters from clothing and cleaning supplies. The most amazing discovery was that the primitive methods actually worked better than their original systems. In some ways, the human-style repairs were simple and robust and did not depend on complex computer controls that could fail again at any moment. The improvised solutions kept working even when other systems continued to break down. News of the successful rescue spread throughout Velari space faster than the ships that carried it. The story seemed incredible to most aliens. A primitive species had saved an advanced civilization. Using nothing but basic tools and stubborn determination, it challenged everything the Velari believed about technology and progress and superiority. The species that had dismissed humans as weak and primitive began to see them in a completely different light. These were not inferior beings struggling to survive in a hostile universe. These were master survivors who had turned their apparent weaknesses into incredible strengths. They had learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy most other species. We have been thinking about this completely wrong, Commander Kale realized as he watched the humans continue their work on the asteroid. We thought that survival meant having perfect technology that never fails, but you have shown us that real survival means being able to adapt and continue. When technology does fail, the human approach to survival was based on completely different assumptions than the Velari way of thinking. The aliens had built their civilization on the belief that perfect technology could eliminate all problems and dangers, but the humans had built their civilization on the belief that problems and dangers were inevitable and that survival meant learning to overcome them. The Velari had focused on creating systems that would never break down. The humans had focused on creating people who could fix anything that did break down. The aliens had tried to eliminate failure from their lives. The humans had learned to turn failure into opportunity and strength. When the Velari rescue ships finally arrived at the asteroid, they found a situation that nobody had expected. Instead of simply taking their people and leaving, they discovered that their own crew did not want to be rescued in the traditional way. The aliens who had been saved by the humans had learned something valuable from these strange, stubborn beings. We would like to offer you passage home, the Velari rescue captain said to the humans, but we would also like to learn more from each other. Perhaps our species can teach each other things that neither of us could learn alone. Captain Deho smiled with genuine warmth and friendship. We would be honored to travel with you and share what we know, but first let us finish mining this asteroid. We came here to do a job, and we always finish what we start. The aliens watched in continued amazement as the humans completed their mining operation using hand tools and muscle power and sheer determination. They had lost their ship, nearly died in the vacuum of space, and saved 300 strangers, but they still insisted on finishing the work they had originally come to do. Your species is truly remarkable, Science Officer Nira told Engineer Hyojin as she watched the humans load the last of the valuable ore into storage containers. You never give up, no matter how difficult things become. Giving up is easy, Hyojin replied while wiping sweat from her face after hours of hard physical labor. Surviving is hard. We choose to do hard things because easy things do not make you stronger. As the combined fleet of human and Velari ships prepared to leave the asteroid belt, the aliens had learned something that would change their entire civilization forever. Technology was powerful and useful, but the will to survive was infinitely more powerful. The humans were not the weakest species in the galaxy. They were the most adaptable, and in a universe full of dangers and surprises, adaptability was the ultimate strength. The story of the asteroid miners and their rescue of the Velari ships spread throughout the galaxy, becoming legend among dozens of different species. They called it the day when the aliens discovered what humans had always known, that survival was not about having the best tools, but about refusing to quit when the tools failed. From that day forward, the Velari began teaching their children human survival techniques. They learned to improvise and adapt and fix things with their own hands. They learned that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most reliable one. They discovered that failure was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. The humans had shown them that strength did not come from having perfect technology, but from having the courage to keep trying when technology failed. They had proven that intelligence was not about knowing all the answers, but about being willing to search for new answers when the old ones stopped working. And in the vast darkness of space where countless civilizations had risen and fallen over millions of years, humanity continued to survive and thrive. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were too stubborn to give up when things became difficult. They had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength, and in doing so they had become teachers for an entire galaxy. The Valari would never forget the lesson they had learned from 4 human asteroid miners, who had shown them that survival was not about avoiding problems, but about solving them with creativity and determination and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Even when everything went wrong and all hope seemed lost, there was always one more thing to try, and humans would keep trying until they found the solution or died in the attempt. That was the human way, and now it would become the Valari way too.